All right, everybody. Joel Kennedy here with another episode of the ConsumerFi podcast. I'm pleased to have the founder and CEO of Bankruptcy Watch, Lance Wickham, taken from the pages of Emily Bronte or something like that. Lance, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, for folks that don't know, Bankruptcy Watch is a fantastic product that Lance is in charge of, and we have a great Nortridge integration. So this one is a special podcast to me because I love to be able to put forth the folks that we have those solid integrations with. There's a tremendous amount of value add to the customers. We're going to get into all that, but to start, I think the question that's probably on everyone's mind, Lance, is looking at the overall economy. What have we been seeing from bankruptcy through the pandemic to now, where the inflationary thoughts have been validated by the data that came in? Consumer prices are way up. Unemployment is still holding steady, and I guess that's the one thing that we have kind of in our favor. But obviously, in the bankruptcy space, you're tracking this. You're seeing stuff that we're not seeing. To kind of fill us in on what you've seen.
Yeah, sure. So prior to the pandemic, in the couple of years prior to the pandemic, bankruptcies stayed very consistent. They were 2019 filing counts were within 1% of 2018 filing counts. So very, very consistent year over year. And then 2020 hit. 2020 started very consistent with the prior 2 years, but then the pandemic hit and everybody locked down, businesses shuttered, the courts stopped functioning, all that stuff. And so we saw bankruptcies really decline in terms of number of bankruptcies. And that maintained course through 2020. Part of what maintained and has maintained the bankruptcy suppression, if you will, throughout 2020 and into 2021 here, is that the government has put into place a number of things, and probably rightly so here. And we can debate how long they should last and all that stuff, but the government put into place things like foreclosure moratoriums, eviction moratoriums. The courts stopped functioning, and so there was no real way to get judgments. And in some cases, they stopped doing judgments, right? And there were states that had repossession moratoriums, and so really, all of the collection side activities ceased pretty much countrywide for a number of months, and in some cases continue to not function at the level that they were. What that means is in the market itself is that people who borrowed money weren't being forced to pay it back, and in many cases have had protections put in place so that they don't have to pay it back. And so as we kind of climb ourselves out of the effects of the pandemic and some of those things start to, some of those moratoriums and other restrictions start to be lifted, we'll probably see sort of a return to normal, if you will. We've also sort of seen some speculation out there, and have speculated ourselves that there's sort of been this pent-up demand that hasn't occurred, and there's going to be sort of a spike in bankruptcies because of the lack of filings, right? So inflation is going to be, I think, a big determining factor with bankruptcies as well. If inflation outpaces the normal family's income growth, then and if that continues long term, we're going to see some real repercussions, because there are a lot of families I think the statistic is something like 70% of families in the United States live paycheck to paycheck or close to it. They don't have a big fund to overcome some large obstacle in their life. And that's going to cause people to start borrowing more or filing bankruptcy, or both, right? When they borrow more and then still can't afford it.
Yeah, it feels shaky right now. Consumer debt, as far as last I saw, is continuing to go up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of, and then, the buy now, pay later movement. I don't know if you've seen this, where you can buy pretty much anything. Like
Yeah.
you can buy a Domino's pizza on an installment plan
Oh,
now.
can you really?
Yeah, buy now, pay later. Yeah, and so I think a lot of us look at that, and it's different from layaway, where it's like, hey, I'm going to pay you in full before I get access to
Right.
the actual piece. I'm just you're retaining it for me.
Yeah.
Whatever
And
I'm
anytime
buying.
I'm online buying something, which is probably half of what I buy is bought from online,
Yeah.
I'm always, in front of me on that screen, I'm always seeing, you could buy this now, or you can pay $7.63 for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
Yeah. So I see that, and the unemployment to me is like kind of the final bastion, because the prices are way up. Net of any employment, like salaries and things of that nature, we are in a negative. And
Hmm.
with people having the access to things such as buy now, pay later, you it's like you said, I made a $200 purchase this month. If I normally bought it, it would cost me 200, but now I can spread it out over all these payments. I don't have the sophistication just as a person to be able to track all those things and make sure
Right.
I'm not getting over my skis. So
Yeah.
I think we've got kind of a perfect scenario. Do you, d- this one may be one you don't know, but in terms of the ability for consumers to file bankruptcy, sometimes that's been an issue where I think certain administrations have tried to make it less easy
Hmm.
for consumers to use bankruptcy as a tool. Um, is there an overall kind of thesis or tone to the conversation that you're sensing at the overall regulatory level, that do you think anything will change in terms of consumers' ability to actually utilize a bankruptcy?
Yeah, there has been some discussion about that. So, just a little history lesson. In 2005, prior to 2005, it was very easy to file bankruptcy. You needed very little paperwork, a couple of pay stubs, a couple of data points, and you could file, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then they had a law change where it became more difficult, in the sense that you had to gather more paperwork, and it became more important even to hire an attorney.
Yeah.
And the attorney costs went up because of the data points that they were having to gather in order to file. And then you saw in 2015, there the court, and this is the administrative offices came out with a set of documents to file your bankruptcy that were supposedly easier to fill out for the layperson, and that was kind of an effort to reduce the cost and make it easier for people to file bankruptcy. There is a healthy economic number to have in terms of bankruptcy filings every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that anybody really knows what that number is. But if you have too few filings, people aren't taking enough risks. Your economic growth is kind of stagnant. If you have too many filings, there's too many other things happening in terms of people taking too many risks, or like we saw in the 2008 2010 timeframe, they took on a certain risk, but then the whole market collapsed under them. Right, that was a whole different problem. But lately, there's been a lot of discussion about the actual cost of filing bankruptcy, where you can be too poor to file bankruptcy, and often the requirements that the court has for how much money you can have, and the equity you can have in your home and things like that, don't allow the borrower or debtor, in bankruptcy terms, enough capacity to actually afford to file bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of an ongoing discussion the last couple of years, and that's probably going to get worse as attorney costs go up, labor costs are going to go up. The service industry overall, their costs are going up, right? Your restaurant employees are getting paid more, minimum wage is going up, things like that, and all of that is affecting these bankruptcy attorneys, the boots on the ground guys that actually do the filing of the cases. They're mostly small firms that do this, and so that's going to drive the cost up for bankruptcy filings. What we saw with the 2015 paper form change, is that it basically didn't make a difference in terms of who was going to file, when they were going to file, how much money they had to have, and all that stuff. And that is largely in part because nobody makes a decision. And I think the courts kind of missed this in some way, that people don't make a decision to file bankruptcy based on how easy the paperwork is to fill out. They make a decision based on what their economic picture looks like as their family, right, and in their home. And so I think that people still have a desire to have an attorney, and that's a smart, in my opinion, that's a smart move because for everybody, and I think every creditor wants the debtor to have an attorney because they'll at least have it done somewhat correct and have another set of eyes on the documents as they're filed, so it's easier for the lenders to process. But there's also talk about where there's a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13 bankruptcy filings that are essentially the two that you see filed most commonly. If you or I were to file personally, it would be one of those two chapters most likely. And there's been talk about kind of combining those and being able to have a single chapter that's less complicated, that's more friendly budget-wise to the lay person that needs to file bankruptcy. But all that, I think, is several years away at the earliest. And so I don't think that there's a whole lot of change coming in the next year or two in terms of the legalities of filing bankruptcy.
That's helpful. So Lance, let's talk a little bit about, the way that people would track and manage and do things with bankruptcies within their organizations as lenders versus, the problems with that your solution is solving, right? I'd love to hear, kind of the old way, and then, what's the way that, the things that you deliver that are value add that solve these problems.
Sure. Well, I think the problems with bankruptcy that lenders see are sort of the same issues you see nationwide with our court system, and that is it takes a long time, it's complicated, you got to get a lot of people involved, and the people you have to get involved are not cheap. And so with bankruptcy, though, it's a very systematized area of law. There's a bunch of rules that once you kind of figure out how to map, you can automate a large portion of the bankruptcy efforts and the responses and stuff like that you have to have. So as a lender, anyway. And so what Nortridge has put together, and they've been fantastic to work with, they've really put together a comprehensive bankruptcy management tool where lenders can automate the management of the new filing notices. The old way was to receive the paper in the mail. The semi-new way is to receive an email of a bankruptcy notification, right? And there are a whole bunch of issues with the way that the old ways worked. They rely on the borrower to list the lender correctly, for example. If the lender has brick and mortar stores and the old address for the old store is used on the bankruptcy paperwork, well, that's where the notification is going. And that's a problem because now as a lender, you don't know that they filed bankruptcy, but you're still required to adhere to the laws of bankruptcy. And so really what Nortridge has put into place is the ability to detect and control who you're watching for bankruptcy. So instead of just hoping the mail gets to you, you actually get to make your own list of people that you're monitoring for bankruptcy, and then be notified when somebody files. And then you get to decide, well, what type of chapter is this? How am I going to respond to each of these bankruptcies? You can decide that and build that into the platform so that the platform knows what to do with each of the different scenarios. And what that means with Chapter 13s is you can build and file your proof of claim. that makes you, as a lender, eligible to get paid through the bankruptcy. A lot of lenders, when they get the bankruptcy notification of a new filing, they just say, well, this is no longer a loan we're collecting on. And they just toss it out the window. But a lot of people don't realize there's money in the bankruptcy that they can be paid. And so anyway, Nortridge has made that a very streamlined process where it takes very little training to actually go through the process of bankruptcy. And then at the end here, the case has a lifespan where you're looking for some certain critical events. You want to know if the case gets thrown out midstream, or you want to know if the case successfully completes and the debtor follows all of their different commitments. And you can track all of that within Nortridge. And the idea here is that when you're using Nortridge, the only time you have to think about bankruptcy is if there's a weird outlier issue with that particular debtor. Many of the scenarios are already covered and automated, where your people don't even have to think about the bankruptcy, but it's all handled for you.
Mm-hmm. What are some examples? I'm curious of like something that would be like out of left field.
Well, maybe somebody stops paying their payment and then they get reinstated, they start again. And, you might have to like take a look at this and say, okay, well, there's a new plan in place now. And what does that look like? Okay, well, let's, just review it for a few minutes. And the cool thing about the Nortridge system is you have direct access to all the documents that are filed in the case. And so if you need to do any of this review, the documents are all there. You just open the thing up, click, run the docket report, and click into the document, do your review, set your reset your system moving forward with that person, and then they're back off to the races again. And so what would take, maybe, I don't know, half an hour to an hour of effort just reviewing the new set of case information, and then knowing that, okay, in 3 months, I've got to check this again just to make sure everything flowed the way it was supposed to. All of that stuff sort of goes away, and it becomes a 5 or 10 minute process, and you don't have to follow up in 3 months because the system is doing that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. This reminds me a lot of the kind of friction that you see with tracking insurance for
Oh,
customers.
yeah.
Very similar there. You
You're
get
right.
these little postcards in the mail, says, hey, this person's insurance has lapsed. It may be true, but they may have gotten bound on something else. So you look to find some of these insurance tracking companies that have massive data seas where they pull all that information in and can validate whether or not the person needs insurance or not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's very similar to that concept. One interesting thing about these court notifications is they all look the same, regardless of the event in the case. And so if you have a person processing paper notifications, they might not realize the importance of the event, or like the importance of that piece of paper compared to the one they got last week about the same case, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's having a person in the bankruptcy loop is problematic when it comes to processing notifications. So just like, processing postcards for insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important that anywhere you can kind of streamline that process, because these are largely administrative things. They're important. You need to see that date. You need to know if you need to go and represent yourself. You need to know if you need to go and make sure your name gets listed so you don't get carved out. These things are things that you want to do very proactively. Lance, has anybody done like any kind of BK Watch type, like look at a consumer at the point of application before you grant the credit?
Absolutely.
There are times in non-prime, I hope I'm not letting any secret out, but I think it's kind of well known. Customers are not restricted to doing a vehicle purchase or some other purchase right before they file for bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a couple of things that that you have to watch out for on the front end when underwriting a loan.
Yeah.
As it relates to bankruptcy. One is, are they going to file right after you give them the loan?
Yeah.
Is that going to be problematic?
There'd be no way for either of us to know that, right? Because
that's right. Now there are some protections for the lenders, because if they go get a loan to pay their attorney, then they obviously are going into debt knowing they're going to file bankruptcy, and they sign that they haven't done that when they file. And so if the lender can show, yeah, look, this was 2 days after they took out a loan from us, they obviously knew they were filing, then that the lender can be included and actually be paid back in those bankruptcies in many cases. But it's a pain in the butt. You've got to hire your attorney, you've got to petition the court, you've got to go through all these things. So you want to just avoid that at the outset. We also we do a lot of underwriting work for people where they want to know live what their status is today with the court system. Did they file bankruptcy 6 months ago? Did they file bankruptcy last week? And if so, what are the outcomes of their cases? Like, was this case thrown out? Did they complete successfully? If they completed successfully, well, they can't file again for a number of years, and they might be a better risk post-bankruptcy than pre-bankruptcy. Yeah. Because now their debt to income ratio is awesome. They just got all their debt discharged.
And there's a lawyer that's overseeing the distribution of proceeds to all the cleared debtors or
yeah, that's
creditors,
right.
Creditors.
Yep. Yeah. In a chapter 13, there's distributions paid out and all that stuff. So yeah, we also work with a number of people who use our tool, not just to see if there's a bankruptcy filing, but to kind of dig deeper and find out, well, first of all, when somebody files a bankruptcy, they're putting all of their financial information out to the public. It's publicly available on the court's website. So we can actually go in and cull through that information. We can read the PDFs electronically and come up with different things and help lenders determine, what's their debt to income ratio post bankruptcy, and what is their income on their bankruptcy, what they're reporting to me outside of bankruptcy with their pay stubs or whatever it might be, right? Yeah. And so, that's used quite often. It's actually possible with our system to try to go get a car loan and be denied that car loan, go file bankruptcy, and go back to the same dealership and get a car loan for the same car the day you filed bankruptcy. And it's because our tools can go in and review the bankruptcy and get the level of detail needed to predict the outcome of that bankruptcy. And lenders are realizing that that's a real opportunity. And there's a number of them out there that do this. And with our tools, it's same day. So
that's great. That's great. I love hearing that that just says there's opportunity. There's tremendous opportunity for us to walk forward with that additional intelligence that is truly going to help us. Because look, if somebody knows that they're going to file bankruptcy and they don't disclose it, it's deceptive,
Sure.
And, I'd hate to see that lenders get holding the bucket, because then what happens is on the lender side, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but that cost has to be borne by somebody. So you're going to see higher rates for the subsequent loans. And then, it just gets passed along.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And then the monitoring on the, obviously on the internal side, you're protecting yourself legally, but then I think there's also some compliance pickups there too. When you can show and demonstrate that you're really taking great care to make sure that you are on top of it. And, everybody knows once you're under bankruptcy protection, you're not to be, I guess, unless it's explicitly denoted, you're not to be directly dealing with the consumer. You have to deal with the lawyer.
Yep. Yeah. And the neat thing about the Nortridge integration is as soon as a notification comes in, different rules fire, and so all the communications stop, for example, so that you don't accidentally contact somebody and send out a letter, and all of a sudden now you're a $3,500 lawsuit into that one $1,500 loan,
Yeah.
And so all of those protections are sort of built in because of the way that the integration works. So it's great.
That's tremendous. Yeah, Nortridge is really good for me with creating different cubbyhole systems for different types of borrowers. So you may have somebody that's assigned for repo, and you're actively going to get the vehicle. You may not want to call the consumer. You just look, it's done. We're done talking with them. Right. Yeah. So you have a status for that. And so those accounts will not get plugged in. They won't funnel into a dialer campaign. Or what we used to do, just rather manually, was we would set a status code for customers that we had confirmed were either going to do a bankruptcy or were in bankruptcy, and we would place them in this other bucket. But
Hmm.
we didn't have all the intelligence behind. We didn't have all the streamline efficiency built in to make that an attractive option. You mentioned earlier, some people just throw up their hands. Some lenders throw up their hands. Others say, you know what? I've got a number of these files, and I'll just bundle them up and sell them off to somebody who likes to buy these things. They have essentially organized their collection department to specifically cater to these types of credits. And they'll purchase
Hmm.
them at a discount, but if you can manage it yourself, right? It's obviously going to be a slower pay because of cram downs,
Right.
but there's still juice in it to get out of it. It just extends the duration. It's not the best, but it's not that it's gone completely, bottoms up kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. It really, interestingly, bankruptcy, the way that it's structured, allows you to turn the court system into your own personal collection agency, and that's a pretty powerful collection agency, the U.S. court system, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's effectively what we're helping people do. We do have a lot of clients that say, look, I used to throw my bankruptcy debt away.
Yeah.
Now I know that I don't have to do that. I have options, and sometimes their volume is low enough. They're just like, look, I'm going to sell my bankruptcy debt, and we can connect them with people that sell bankruptcy debt. We can actually automate that process. So when a bankruptcy comes through and it's the kind that you don't want to deal with, then you can sell it. And the timing of the sale is controllable by you, and the ability to get that debt back if the bankruptcy gets thrown out, all that stuff is pretty slick. And often, because of the court system being the collection agency, bankruptcy debt is more valuable than debt that is not in bankruptcy. And so,
Yeah.
and especially right now, I mean, like the used car market right now is really interesting from a bankruptcy standpoint. They're paying out very high percentages on the dollar for bankruptcy car debt. So
Yeah. Everything's inflated.
yeah.
Well, this is all great stuff, Lance. So, for folks that are seeing the visual, we do have the email and the phone number. It's going to be info@bankruptcywatch.com, number 866-BK-WATCH, for folks that want to get connected up with Lance. Obviously, you want to reach out to me and come through the Nortridge way, I can get you directly tied up with looped up, I should say, with Lance and his team. Lance, so maybe a closing thought, anything you kind of want to throw out there for folks, whether it's kind of precautionary about, hey, we think we're going to see more bankruptcies, or the things that we've done together on the Nortridge side. I'll let you kind of have the last word.
Yeah, sure. What we're finding right now, so what is it? It's November 12th today, 2021, and what we've been finding, especially lately, is that the savvy lenders are realizing that bankruptcy numbers are low right now, and that there will likely be a pressure relief of some kind once kind of all this pandemic stuff runs its course.
Yeah.
And that's expected to be sometime next year, between the inflationary issues that we're seeing, and the just the market dynamics, and then as we watch the funds available as lenders sort of tighten their grip on who they're lending to and all that stuff, I think that they will. We're going to see a significant increase in bankruptcies. So I would say that in closing here, that you don't want to wait until the spike happens to try to automate your bankruptcy department. Use the extra mind share that you have right now because of the low numbers. Use your internal expertise, or reach out to somebody like us or Nortridge to gain the expertise while the numbers are low, and get your system set up. Because one of the really neat things about this is once the system is all set up and running, it is very scalable, and you won't even feel the spike from an urgency standpoint. It'll just happen for you, and you'll be able to collect the maximum amount of money from each bankruptcy that's possible.
I love to hear it. It's a great relationship. It's been very well received by the Nortridge community.
Yeah.
Lance, thanks so much for taking the time and kind of filling us in on the current state of affairs with the bankruptcy as it ties to the economy, but also really exciting stuff with your solution, and excited to have you as a partner.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Joe.